Hi, my name's Amelia. Welcome to Gray Lamb. This is a channel where I talk about parental narcissistic abuse, and I also am sharing stories about my personal life. So I'll be illustrating some things that I've learned from researching narcissistic parental abuse and discussing ideas that I have that I'm applying as well to a workbook. Through the years of de-enmeshing myself with my family, I've come across some terms that have really liberated me. And although the subject matter is really heavy and really depressing and very sad, I have been able to find some humor in it. So this video is called Margot's Greatest Darvos. So darvo is a term used to describe a pattern of behavior that narcissists and psychological attacking type people do. It's DARVO, and it stands for deny, attack, reverse the victim and the offender. So I'm going to just try to be quick, telling you 3 of the worst darvos that were committed against me by my mother. Other than this, my mother most of the time has been a fairly decent person. But when she gets backed into a corner and something really severe is happening, her responses have been detrimental to our relationship, detrimental to my development as a human being, and to the point that I'm in my late 40s and I'm still trying to get this out of my system. So the first and possibly the worst darvo happened to me when I was turning 6 years old. We moved to a new city that I'd never been to before, and before I turned 6, most of the places that we lived were fairly safe. Safe meaning you could kind of walk out your door, and we most of the time didn't live on major streets. We lived in rural areas up until I was about 5 years old. So when we came to this city, we walked in the door to the place that we were going to be living. We were moving into the city and we were renting a room. This is back in the 80s. And my mother was quite overwhelmed by the presence of the person who was showing us the room, who would then become her boyfriend. So her being distracted and anxious and just fleeing an abusive relationship, she did not have her wits about her. So I probably asked if I could go to the store, which was across the street. We were having something for dinner and we needed something that was at the store. So me being already the little adult at 6 years old that day, I was allowed to go to the store. Unfortunately, I walked out between 2 parked cars as I was never familiar with busy streets, and I was hit by a car. It wasn't a severe thing. There was no blood, there was no broken bones, but I remember being on the curb and later having a memory of this car driving away. It was a hit and run, and my mother coming out of the house. Years later, I mentioned to her, I don't think you came to see me when I was on the ground. She had revenge on her mind and she'd gone into the house to get a baseball to throw at the car. It's an understandable action. It's understandable that she reacted without thinking. That's not the problem. The problem comes later. So the problem arose later in my life when I talked to her about this, because the accident was a crime. It was never reported. I was put in the newspaper, which was against my will and humiliated me. And then I had to start school, first day of grade 1. So later in my life, I had to talk to her about this because it was a massive thing that, ruined my life, basically. It probably laid the groundwork for the spinal and neck problems that I have, ruined my nervous system, that sort of thing. So this is where we apply darvo, D-A-R-V-O, okay? Deny. So what I said to her was, it was not my decision to go to the store because I was a child. Can you believe you have to have these conversations with people? And she said that I was pushing to go. So she was putting the blame on a 6-year-old child for getting hit by a car, as if it was my fault and if I chose to do it. So this is when she started to play with my mind and manipulate my mind. So the rest of the story here was, within this dynamic, my mother felt extremely threatened at her reputation of people finding out that she made that mistake and she wasn't the perfect mother. So she began to reverse the order of who was the victim and who was the offender in the whole relationship. And she eventually started to tamper with my reputation, tell people that I was a bad kid, that sort of thing. And it just kind of escalated slowly from there throughout my whole life, because she had shame about her reaction to the car accident and her part in it, and would not admit that it was 100% her fault that I was allowed to leave the house. It was not her fault that I was hit by a car, but it was her responsibility, which she refused to take, and decided to mess with my mind by gaslighting me into thinking that it was my fault. So if you're still with me, I'm just going to name off 2 other incidents in which my mother used Darvo. When she was in her early 40s, my mother went back to university. We were poor. We were always on assistance. And she wanted to go to teacher's college in another province in Canada. She told me, after I had been in an abusive relationship, arrested for shoplifting, in a group home, all these things that have been going on in my life because of the example that my parents had put out for me, caused me to be completely deranged as a young teenager. Her idea was that it would be a good idea for her to leave the province for 8 months or more to get a teaching certificate. So logically, on paper, this sounds like a good idea. Except for the one fact, I had no support. I was put on welfare. I was left in a house that I was responsible to move everything out of into another house a month after she left. And I was still healing from being in a physically abusive relationship when I was 14 years old for 1.5 years. I was completely messed up. Wrong time to do this. So I believe all this happened because my mother did not have the skills or understanding to be a mother, and she continued to try to hide this with her actions. So she was seen as a hero going back to school in her 40s. Oh, how brave. People told me this all the time, and I was just like, I'm going to the food bank and I'm 16 and I have nobody. I have no dad, I have no sister, I have no aunt, nobody. In fact, I was given the phone number by an older cousin to call if I ever needed help, and asked to be taken to the hospital and was told no. So that's when my health started to really decline. So back to the point. So my mother asked me when I was 15 years old if she should go to teacher's college in another province. I think it's an 8-hour drive, and my mother did not even have a car. So what do you say when you're a 15-year-old and you like to party in your house when your mom's away? Well, of course you say yes. But it wasn't as simple as that. It was a manipulation. It was her trying to get out of her motherly duties. It was her being impatient while I was growing up. It was her trying to get rid of me. And it worked. I said yes, and she left. Now, years later, I had told her about this. I said that was a mistake and that should never have happened. You don't leave a teenage girl in a circumstance like this and put them on welfare. It's wrong. Now, her response to that, remember the car accident, was that it was my fault. It was my fault that I said yes to her leaving the province. So she put all the family's decisions on a 15-year-old. Sounds a lot like when she put all the blame on a 6-year-old. So this became her legacy of hiding the shame that she made a mistake. She used to say that she made mistakes. I don't call decisions that alter people's lives permanently and ruin their relationship a mistake. I call it a massive tragedy for which you must spend much of your life doing better, you know? So she denied that she chose to go away. This is Darvo. She attacked my reputation by spreading rumors about me in the community, in my greater family, in my friend groups, people I don't even know. Once when I was about 20 years old, I went to a counselor and my mother happened to know her. And she said, well, I can't really treat you because I know your mother in the community. And I said, and she's like, do you want to go forward? And I was like, I'm a kid, I'm 20. Sure, yes, let's go forward. Then she started to condemn me and tell me that I was bad and I had this reputation and blah, blah, blah. So I went to my mother and I told her that. I should have never spoken to my mother again at that point, but again, when you're raised with gaslighting and confusion, you don't have the best problem-solving skills. You don't know what to do because you're being mentally and emotionally manipulated. So in order to hide her shame about her decision to go away and leave me and all the things that I had been through, she denied, she attacked my character, and she reversed the victim. So I was the victim when I was 15 and I was abandoned and put on welfare by my family, but suddenly she's the victim. So that's Darvo. It's a really good tactic. And I think it means possibly the person is mentally ill, because how can you be so cruel and such a liar and deliberately hurt somebody you're supposed to love in order to protect the fact that you made a very bad decision? It's not the right thing to do. So the last instance of Darvo, these are just the big three in my life that my mother did, was just 1 year ago. So a year ago, I was having unstable housing because my partner was going through something and it was making it difficult for me to feel safe in the house. A lot of people through the pandemic have gone through a lot of tragedies, and that is what happened to myself and my partner. A lot of things I don't want to talk about, but I was in a really vulnerable position, and that had been going on for a year. And I was a threat of losing what was left of my health and my home. And my mother had been trying to help me for a while. She got to the point, however, where she couldn't take it anymore. And she, I guess, decided that she was going to give me her house. My mother is not just a narcissist. She has a good side that is sort of give till it hurts. Go above and beyond for whatever reason, whether it's some sort of manic behavior or just love and concern. But when she goes very, very far in one direction, it's always scary because I know there's going to be a repercussion, or that she's putting herself through too much, martyring herself perhaps, I don't know. But at this point, I had told her, because of my health, I cannot live in an apartment and I cannot afford an apartment. And if you ever want to move out of your house, I would be very happy to rent your house. I can afford it. So we made an agreement that she was going to move out of her house because she's elderly and find an apartment that was more suitable where she didn't have to take care of the house. I was okay with this arrangement. I knew there really wasn't anything else I could do because I'm a person with a disability. I cannot live in an apartment building where I won't be able to sleep because of noise and heat, noise from air conditioners, insects. It's not a good scene. When you're extremely sensitive, especially to heat and noise, I would not be able to survive living in an apartment. Right now, where I live, we're having a week of above 30 degrees Celsius weather, which is extreme heat. And unless I would be okay with having a window box air conditioner that makes a ton of noise, I can't handle that. It actually hurts. I have a brain disease, so it hurts my head and I can't sleep. So we agreed that this arrangement would be beneficial to both of us. And I said, you know, when she started talking about giving me her house, I didn't say, oh yeah, I'll move in. I said, if it's the right thing for you to do, which is what I would always say to her. If she was overgiving, that wouldn't be good for her or me. So I was always exercising caution when dealing with her and whatever moves she was going to make. So very well prepared for this to fall apart. So I confirmed it with her and we discussed it. And we discussed it again. And I said, can I tell some of the family? And she said, yes. Then she came back to her house after she'd been away and everything was different. She was a different person. Her face looked differently. She talked differently. I've only seen her like this a handful of times in my life. And here comes the Darvo, okay? So she said she can't afford to move out and she made a mistake. So I wrote her an email. I said, I don't even know what to say. And she wrote back, I don't know what to say either. So here I was given a house. I was starting to get excited. I was thinking, okay, I have a future now. I'm not in danger anymore. I'm going to be maybe okay. And it was a no. So what happened next was I couldn't speak to her anymore. What do you do? What do you say when somebody gives you a house for medical reasons and takes it away when your life is kind of in danger? I'm like severely allergic to the heat. It's nuts, the illness that I have. So the end of the story is that I found out months later that my mother was angry at me. Actually, it wasn't months later, weeks later. Was angry at me. She said that it never happened. She didn't give me the house. And I told her, I said, this is the same behavior you've done in the past. How could you do this to me? Like, I don't even know what to say. So the worst part was I found out months later that she'd seen my best friend behind my back. She'd run into my best friend of the past and said, let's get together and talk about Amelia. Now, during this time, I don't want to explain my situation, but I was not safe in my living circumstances. And if I'm not safe in my living circumstances, my life is at risk. For example, when I go to the hospital, they don't even know what to do with me because my symptoms are just beyond what they see normally. At the end of the story, according to my mother, I made it up that she gave me her house, and then I was a jerk and she's the victim. So she did this because she felt ashamed that she gave me her house and took it away. And she decided the best way of handling it was to blame me for her actions. So there you go. That's Darvo. Deny, attack, reverse victim, the order of victim and offender. So this is why I've had to come to realize my mother is cruel and therefore I don't deserve this in my life, and I'm happier without my mother. My mother has still been crossing my boundaries even though we're estranged, but I'm choosing to stop retaliating because it doesn't work. Telling somebody over and over again what your boundaries are and to stop spreading your personal information around the community, making fun of you, it doesn't really work. And in this case, it's not completely over. I don't have power over my mother, but I was able to block all her emails and phone numbers. Also, everyone in my life knows, basically that I don't speak to her, and I'm doing this work here on the video and the channel to help myself and perhaps even get through to some others. It takes a long time for us to understand our circumstances and our situations, and it takes sometimes a lot of talking, learning, listening, integrating. It took me years, but I'm getting there.